My name is Harriet Lance. I'm 30 years old, and I was married for exactly 14 days before my husband chose another woman over me. 14 days. That's not a metaphor. That's not exaggeration. That's the exact number of days it took for my entire life to collapse in on itself. What makes it worse is everything before that felt real, solid, like something I could build a future on. I'm a structural engineer. I design buildings meant to stand for decades. Structures that carry weight, survive pressure, and don't crumble under stress. But somehow, I didn't see the cracks in my own marriage forming until it was already too late. I met Ethan Walker 3 years ago on a construction site. We had an injured hawk tangled in one of the steel frames, wings twisted in a way that made even the toughest guys on site look away. Someone called the wildlife center, and that's when he showed up. Mud on his boots, hair pulled back carelessly, completely out of place in a sea of helmets and concrete dust. But the moment he touched that bird, everything slowed down. He spoke to it softly, like it could understand him. His hands were steady, careful. There was this quiet confidence about him, like he knew exactly how to fix something fragile without breaking it further. I remember standing there thinking, this man heals things. I didn't realize back then. He didn't know how to keep anything from breaking. We started talking that day. It was easy, effortless. He'd just moved to the city. I offered to show him around, half joking, half hoping. He said yes. That turned into dinner, then another. Then weekends that blurred into something warm and familiar. 3 years later, I thought I knew him. We built a life that felt right. Messy sometimes. He'd bring injured animals home like our apartment was some kind of emergency clinic. At one point, we had a 3-legged raccoon living in our bathroom for a week. I complained. He laughed. And somehow, it became one of those stories we'd tell like it was normal. I worked long hours. Too long, probably. Big projects, tight deadlines, constant pressure. He used to tease me about it, said I cared more about buildings than people. I used to laugh. Looking back now, maybe that was projection. We talked about everything: kids someday, a house in the suburbs, stupid little things like how we both hated cilantro and loved late-night crime documentaries. It all lined up too perfectly. And maybe that should have scared me. The wedding was everything he wanted. A vineyard ceremony. Elegant, expensive, carefully planned down to the smallest detail. I spent nearly a year saving for it. Over time, missed weekends, saying no to everything just to make it happen. Because every time I pictured that day, I saw his smile. And when I finally saw it, standing there at the altar, it felt worth it. I remember the way his hand tightened around mine when we said our vows. I choose you, he said. I believed him. God, I believed him. The honeymoon in Bali was like something out of a dream. Sunsets that didn't feel real. Warm nights. That quiet, peaceful happiness people talk about but rarely get to keep. When we came back, it didn't disappear right away. We were still in that bubble, still calling each other husband and wife like we couldn't believe it, still wearing our rings like they meant something sacred. He even talked about starting a family. Maybe next year, he said one night, pulling me closer. I remember smiling into his shoulder, thinking, this is it. This is the life I built. This is the man I chose. And for 14 days, it stayed that way. Then something shifted. At first, it was so small I almost missed it. Ethan started using his phone more, not casually, carefully, turning the screen away when I walked in, locking it faster than necessary, smiling at messages he didn't explain. Before the wedding, he used to tease me for checking work emails at dinner. Now, he was the one disappearing into his screen, like I wasn't even there. I noticed, but I didn't question it, because when you love someone, you don't start with suspicion. You start with excuses. He's tired. Work is stressful. Maybe he's planning something. I told myself all of those things. Then came the late nights. His job had always been unpredictable. Emergency cases, overnight care. It wasn't unusual, but this felt different. The stories didn't add up. One night, he said he stayed late for an injured fox. The next morning, I saw the Wildlife Center post about that same fox, already released hours earlier. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. Then I locked it and told myself I was overthinking. I wasn't. I just didn't want to be right. And then, her name came back into our life. Rachel, his ex, a trauma surgeon, the one he'd spent years with before she left the country. Now she was back. And suddenly, so was everything he never let go of. It started subtly. Mentions in conversation. Stories that felt too detailed for casual updates. Then came the texts. Then the silence. And then, the distance. Our apartment, which used to feel full, started to feel quiet, like something had already left, even though he was still there. The morning everything broke. I'd been awake since 5 a.m. Deadlines, pressure, a massive project that refused to come together. I was sitting in my office, staring at foundation plans, trying to force my brain to cooperate. That's when Ethan walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept. Pale, hollow, like something inside him had already unraveled. He sat down slowly, and then he started crying. Not controlled, not quiet. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and ugly. My heart dropped. I thought someone had died. In a way, they had. He told me he'd seen Rachel, that they'd been talking. For weeks. Weeks. Before our wedding. And then he said it. I think I still have feelings for her. The room didn't spin. It didn't shatter. It just went still. Like everything inside me shut down at once. He kept talking. About confusion. About needing clarity. About figuring things out. As if we weren't already married. As if the vows we made 2 weeks ago were just temporary. I remember staring at him, waiting for something. Anything that made sense. Nothing did. So I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was the only thing stopping me from breaking. Then I opened my laptop, typed in, "Best divorce lawyers near me," and started dialing. Right in front of him. He panicked. "Harriet, what are you doing?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't recognize the man in front of me. "What you should have done," I said quietly, "before you married me." That's when the truth finally surfaced. He didn't come to ask. He came to tell. His bags were already packed. By the door. He had already decided. I was just the last person to know. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. "You have two choices," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You cut her off. Completely. Right now." I paused. "Or you walk out that door. And you don't come back." He looked at me like I was the problem. "Why does it have to be so black and white?" That was it. That was the moment I understood everything. I pointed at the door. "Get out." He hesitated. Then he grabbed his bag. Tried to hug me on the way out. I stepped back. Didn't touch him. Didn't say goodbye. And a few seconds later, I heard his car disappear down the street. 14 days. That's all it took for my marriage to end. But I didn't know yet that the worst part wasn't losing him. It was what came after. The first night after Ethan left was quiet. Too quiet. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind you choose. The kind that presses against your ears until you can hear your own thoughts echoing back at you. His side of the bed was still warm. His mug was still in the sink. His jacket still hung by the door like he might walk back in and pretend none of this happened. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it, waiting. Not for him to come back, but for myself to react, to cry, to scream, to break something. I did none of those things. Instead, I picked up my phone and called Kyle. He didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. Send me your address. I'm coming. By the time he arrived, I had already poured myself a drink, then another, then stopped counting. He walked in, took one look at me, and said nothing. Just sat down next to me like he'd done 100 times before when life decided to punch me in the face. We didn't talk much that night. We didn't need to. But somewhere between the silence and the alcohol, reality started settling in. Ethan didn't make a mistake. He made a choice. And somehow, that made everything easier. The next morning, reality came knocking. Literally. Aggressive. Sharp. Repeated. For a second, I thought it was Ethan. I was wrong. It was his father, Michael Walker. 6'4". Military posture. The kind of man who looked like he could dismantle you without raising his voice. I opened the door expecting anger. Instead, he looked at me, sighed, and said, "My son's an idiot. You got coffee?" I blinked. "Come in." We sat in the kitchen, me, Kyle, and this man who should have been defending his son. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and dropped something that shifted everything. "I never liked Rachel." I frowned. "Why?" He hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. "Because she cheated on him." The room went still. "What?" "Back in college," he said. "He never found out. We kept it from him. Thought it would hurt him more than help." I let out a hollow laugh. "So let me get this straight. My husband left me for a woman who already betrayed him once." Michael gave a slow nod. "Yeah, that about sums it up." For a second, I almost felt sorry for Ethan. Almost. Then I remembered the packed bags, the lies, the way he stood there and tried to justify it like it was something noble. And just like that, the sympathy disappeared. The next few days were chaos. Paperwork, calls, legal consultations. We had just merged our finances after the wedding. Now I was untangling everything like a knot that shouldn't have existed in the first place. But the worst part wasn't the logistics. It was the truth. That came from his younger brother, James. He showed up at my place looking uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I think you should see this," he said quietly. Then he handed me his phone. Messages. Dozens of them. Between Ethan and Rachel. Going back months. Some of them. From the week before our wedding. I didn't react right away. I just stared at the screen. Reading. Rereading. Trying to find something. Anything. That suggested hesitation. Guilt. Regret. There was none. Just excitement. Anticipation. Plans. That was the moment something inside me finally settled. Not shattered. Not exploded. Settled. Like the last piece of a puzzle sliding into place. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a mistake. This was betrayal. Planned. Executed. And now, irreversible. After that, I stopped checking my phone, stopped waiting for his calls, stopped caring about what he was doing, because I already knew he had chosen her. So I chose something else. Myself. I went back to work. Threw myself into the project that had been consuming my life for months. 50 stories, complex foundation issues, tight deadlines, the kind of problem that didn't care about your emotions. And for the first time in weeks, that was exactly what I needed. No feelings, just structure, just logic, just something that made sense. And somehow, I thrived. Long nights turned into breakthroughs, calculations turned into solutions, and before I knew it, I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. My boss called me into his office one morning, closed the door, and said, "Harriet, your design just saved the client millions." I blinked. "What?" He smiled. "Congratulations. You're being promoted." For a second, I didn't know how to react, because everything in my personal life was falling apart, but professionally, I was rising, and that contrast did something to me. It shifted my perspective. Because while Ethan was chasing a fantasy, I was building something real. Meanwhile, his fantasy was already cracking. James kept me updated, whether I asked or not. "They're posting pictures together," he said one day. Like, constantly. I shrugged. Good for them. But then the tone changed. "They fight a lot." I didn't respond. "Rachel works insane hours," he continued. "Barely home. Leaves him alone most nights." I almost smiled. Funny how that worked. Then came the part that felt almost poetic. "Olivia's been hanging around Rachel," James added. I frowned. "Olivia?" "Yeah. Lunches, private meetings, that kind of thing." I leaned back slowly. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The whispers, the encouragement, the way she pushed Ethan toward Rachel. She wasn't helping him. She was positioning herself. And Ethan? He was too blinded by nostalgia to see it. A few days later, I got confirmation. A message from someone at the Wildlife Center. A screenshot. Ethan arguing with Rachel. Another one. Rachel meeting Olivia. Too close. Too comfortable. I stared at the screen, and for the first time since everything happened, I smiled. Not out of joy, out of clarity. Because karma wasn't coming. It was already here, and it was just getting started. Then came the moment I didn't expect. I ran into Ethan. He looked different. Not happier. Not relieved. Just tired. Like someone who finally realized the cost of their decisions. "Harriet," he said softly. I stopped, turned, waited. "I made a mistake." "Of course you did." I didn't say it. I didn't need to. He stepped closer. I thought I needed to figure things out, but now you have." I finished for him. He nodded quickly. "Yes. And I want to fix this. Us." I looked at him for a long moment, really looked, and realized something surprising. I didn't miss him. Not even a little. "You didn't lose me because you were confused," I said calmly. He frowned. "You lost me because you chose someone else," while standing next to me at the altar. His face fell. "Harriet, please." "I hope she was worth it," I added quietly. Then I walked away. And this time, I didn't look back. That should have been the end. But life wasn't done yet. Because just a week later, I got a call that changed everything. A job offer, Singapore, 2-year contract, massive project, life-changing money. And just like that, I had a choice. Stay in the wreckage, or leave it behind. I didn't hesitate, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting to someone else's decisions. I was making my own. And somewhere in the distance, I could already hear the sound of everything Ethan built, starting to collapse. By the time I signed the Singapore contract, Ethan's life was already unraveling. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly, quietly, like something rotting from the inside out. And the strangest part? I wasn't even there to watch it happen. But somehow, I still knew. Because people talk. Because karma doesn't need an audience. And because when someone builds their happiness on betrayal, it never holds. James was the first to tell me things weren't going well. "They fight all the time now," he said one afternoon at work. Like, really bad. I didn't look up from my screen. "That's unfortunate." He hesitated. "Rachel's barely home. She's working nonstop. And when she is home, she doesn't treat him like I did?" I finished quietly. He nodded. I didn't respond, because I already knew the answer. Ethan didn't miss me. He missed what I gave him. The stability, the patience, the way I made space for him in a life that was already full. Rachel didn't do that. She didn't need to. And slowly, that fantasy he chased started turning into something else. Something real. Something disappointing. Then came Olivia. Of course it did. The same woman who whispered in his ear, the one who told him to follow his heart, the one who convinced him that what he had with me wasn't enough. Turns out, she wasn't done yet. She started showing up around Rachel more. Lunches, meetings, casual conversations that weren't casual at all. And Ethan? He didn't see it. Not at first. But eventually, he did. Because one night, everything blew up. Rachel had planned something. Dinner, I think. Something small. Something that probably mattered more to her than she wanted to admit. And right in the middle of it, a message came through. From Olivia. Not subtle. Not careful. Something about missing their private lunches. Something about hoping Rachel didn't check his other phone. Other phone. That was the moment. The illusion shattered. Rachel confronted him. He denied it. Olivia didn't. In fact, from what I heard, she leaned into it, looked Rachel dead in the eyes and said, "At least I waited until he was single." And just like that, everything Ethan destroyed his marriage for collapsed in front of him. Rachel walked out. Olivia didn't stay. And Ethan was left with nothing. Not even the version of himself he thought he'd become. I found all of this out in pieces. Through James. Through mutual connections. Through whispers that found their way back to me whether I wanted them or not. But the moment that mattered most was the one I experienced myself. My farewell party. My firm rented out this rooftop bar. People I'd worked with for years showed up. Some clients, some friends. For the first time in months, I felt light. Free. Like I had finally stepped out of something heavy and into something new. And then, of course, Ethan showed up. Right on cue. He looked worse than I remembered. Thinner. Tired. Like he hadn't slept in days. But what stood out wasn't his appearance. It was his expression. Desperation. He walked straight toward me like nothing else in the room existed. "Harriet," he said, breathless, "I need to talk to you." I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't soften. There was nothing left in me for him. "I made a mistake," he said again. "Rachel, she's not. This wasn't what I thought it would be." I tilted my head slightly. "That sounds like a you problem." He flinched. "I was confused," he continued. "I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." "Of course you didn't. That's how people like you work." "You're right," I said calmly. His eyes lit up. Hope, fragile and misplaced. "I didn't realize what you had either." The hope died instantly. "Harriet." "No," I cut him off. "You don't get to come back here and rewrite what happened." My voice didn't shake. That surprised even me. "You didn't lose me because you were confused," I continued. "You lost me because you made a choice. Over and over again." He stepped closer. "I can fix this." I almost laughed. "No," I said quietly. "You can't." Because the truth was simple. Some things don't break. They end. And once they end, they stay that way. Security eventually stepped in. Not because I asked them to, but because Ethan couldn't accept what was happening. He raised his voice, tried to argue, tried to turn it into something dramatic. It wasn't. It was just over. And for the first time since everything started, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. The final scene came at the airport. Of course it did, because apparently Ethan believed life worked like a movie. Grand gestures, last-minute confessions, miracles at departure gates. He was waiting for me, luggage in hand, eyes red, hope still clinging to something that didn't exist anymore. "I'm coming with you," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "I bought a ticket," he continued quickly. "We can figure things out in Singapore, start fresh. Just you and me." For a moment, I just stared at him, trying to understand how someone could be so disconnected from reality. Then I noticed something behind him. His father, Michael, watching, tired, disappointed, not surprised. Ethan kept talking. About love, about fighting for what matters, about not giving up. And all I could think was, you gave up first. I walked past him, straight to check in. He followed. Of course he did. Harriet, please, he said, voice breaking. Don't do this. I turned slightly, looked at him one last time. What we had was special, I said. He froze. But you traded it for a fantasy. His lips parted, but no words came out. And now, I added softly, you're asking me to rebuild something you destroyed, while chasing something that didn't even exist. Silence. Then I turned away. And that was it. No dramatic goodbye, no second chance. Just the end. The flight was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in months, I slept. When I woke up, I was somewhere new. A different country, a different life, a version of myself that didn't revolve around someone else's choices. Singapore was everything I needed it to be. Fast, alive, full of possibilities. The project challenged me in ways I hadn't expected, and I thrived. Again. And somewhere along the way, I met someone. Not a replacement, not a rebound. Just someone who showed up honestly, consistently, without confusion, without hesitation. And that's when it hit me. The worst thing that ever happened to me was also the thing that set me free. As for Ethan, last I heard, he's alone, trying to piece together a life built on decisions he can't undo. I don't hate him. I don't miss him. I don't even think about him that much anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I remember the girl I was standing at that altar, hopeful, certain, in love, and I don't feel sorry for her. Because she survived, she learned, and she walked away. And that's something Ethan will never get back.